It was an unusual thing not for those who had lived through the endless wars, politics, and ancient rivalries between species, but this time the galaxy was on the edge of something much darker, something more dangerous the sea and advanced species known for their wisdom and medical expertise had found themselves in the middle of a crisis that could tear everything apart. Their highest diplomat, Lady Isa, had fallen ill under mysterious circumstances, and no one knew what was wrong. The Cath had always been seen as the masters of medical science. Their healing techniques were legendary, known across the stars for their ability to cure diseases that others couldn't even name. So when Lady Sa, one of their most respected diplomats, collapsed without warning, it was unthinkable. Their healers, the most skilled in the galaxy, had done everything they could, but despite their advanced knowledge, they couldn't diagnose the problem. And as the days passed, Lady Rayla's condition only worsened. Her symptoms were unlike anything that Cath had seen before. An extreme pain that seemed to be coming from deep within her body, swelling, and a mysterious clotting that caused her to lose energy with each passing hour. The carry healers tried everything, but nothing worked. They had done their best, but they had hit a wall. It was a moment of deep desperation for them. Lady Rayla's condition was getting worse by the minute, and the K ferry were running out of time. The diplomats had to make a decision. Should they trust their human counterparts, or should they let the disease run its course? The humans, a relatively young species in the galactic scene, had made their way into the fold of galactic politics and diplomacy. They had not yet earned the same level of respect that the Cthulhu had, but their reputation for being stubborn and surprisingly clever had earned them a spot among the stars. Some of the galactic species had grown to trust them, others had not, but there was one thing that humanity had, something that set them apart from the others: their creativity. Despite this, the sea were hesitant to trust human methods. Humans didn't have the ancient traditions of medicine or the centuries of scientific knowledge that the Cthulhu did. They had only begun to understand the vastness of space, and their medical techniques were at best rudimentary in comparison to the highly refined practices of the Cthulhu. But when it came to Lady Sela's condition, the Cathy had no other choice. It was then that Dr. Ethan Mullery, a human medic aboard the Human Alliance ship, was called in. He had worked with the Cthulhu before, though not in a medical capacity. He was a young, promising doctor still working his way through the complexities of galactic medicine. But he had one thing that he did: an open mind and a willingness to try new approaches. When Dr. Mullery arrived in the medical bay, he was greeted with an air of disbelief. The Kyrie healer stood aside as he examined Lady Rayla, but their skepticism was clear. How could this human possibly help their revered diplomat when their own advanced doctors had failed? Dr. Mullery did not let their doubts shake him. He had learned long ago that a good doctor could never stop thinking outside the box. He began his examination, running a series of scans and diagnostic tests that were standard procedure for human medics. But something the Cthulhu had never seen: the human technology was more focused on the individual than the species as a whole, allowing for a level of precision the Cthulhu had never imagined. He worked quickly but carefully, knowing the time was a luxury they did not have. As he worked, he could feel the tension in the room rise. The Cathy were watching him closely, unsure what he might find. There was a heavy silence, broken only by the hum of the machines and the soft beeping of Lady Sa's vital signs. It was then that Dr. Mullery made his first real breakthrough. After studying the scans and comparing them to human medical texts, he saw something that the Cath had missed: a clot in an area of her body that had been overlooked entirely. The clot was small but dangerous, located in a place no Siri physician had ever considered. It was in her private area, hidden deep within her biological system. The Carry had never seen such a condition before, and their methods had failed to detect it. This clot was the root of Lady Sela's pain, swelling, and the increasing weakness. She felt it was not a typical problem for they had never encountered anything like it, and their methods simply weren't designed to treat it. The realization hit Dr. Mullery like a shockwave. There was no one who could help Lady Ciro but him. With his discovery, the room grew even quieter. The HFY officials who had watched with skepticism now looked at him with a mix of hope and doubt. Could this human truly help their diplomat, or was this a mistake? They didn't know, but one thing was clear: if they didn't try, they would lose Lady Sarah forever. Dr. Mullery stood Up looking at the alien diplomats with newfound determination. "I can help her," he said, his voice steady despite the pressure. "But I need your trust, and I need you to let me try the Cathy." Desperate and running out of time, exchanged uneasy glances, but in the end, it was Lady SAA's life that mattered most. They agreed to let the human take the lead, and so with the galaxy holding its breath, the fate of Lady Sarah, and perhaps much more, rested in the hands of human medic Dr. Ethan Mallory's hands were steady as he looked at the scans of Lady Sarah's body. The silence in the medical bay was thick, almost suffocating. The Kyrie officials and healers stood around him waiting for his verdict. They had never allowed a human to take charge of their highest diplomat's health, but now they had no choice. All eyes were on him, and he could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. He stared at the holographic images floating in front of him, zooming in on the part of the scan that had caused the most confusion. For hours, the Cthulhu healers had tried to figure out what was wrong, but every test they ran showed nothing more than vague patterns there. Most advanced medical techniques had failed, and yet here was the clue that had been overlooked: a small dent. Clot, it wasn't in her heart or lungs where the Cthulhu had expected to find it. It wasn't in any of the obvious places they had checked. Instead, it was located deep in her private area within her reproductive system. The clot was dangerously close to a large artery, and it was pressing on nerves and tissues, which was causing her excruciating pain. Dr. M's breath caught. For a moment, he knew this kind of clot could be fatal if not treated. Decay. Fairy healers had missed it because they weren't familiar with human anatomy and didn't understand how clots could form. In places they never thought to check, they had assumed Lady SAA's condition was something far more complex than it was. Lady SAA had been lying unconscious for hours now, barely able to respond. Her vital signs were weak and time was running out. Dr. Mullery knew he had to act quickly, but he also knew that the procedure required precision and care. One wrong move, and the clot could worsen or worse. Lady SAA might not survive. He turned to the cave fairy officials who had been watching him closely. "I know what's wrong with her," he said, his voice firm but calm. "Lady Sarah has a clot, and it's located in a place that none of you expected." The Kyrie healers exchanged confused glances. One of them, an older woman with silver skin, stepped forward. "What do you mean? We have checked every part of her body. There is nothing wrong." "I know it's hard to believe," Dr. Mullery replied, "but the clot is in her private area. It's small, but it's growing, and it's pressing on vital organs and nerves." The room went silent. The Cathy could not hide there. Shocked, they had never encountered such a thing. Their species had never had this kind of medical issue before, and they certainly had never seen it in their highest diplomat. It was almost unthinkable. "But how?" asked another Cthulhu healer. "How could we miss something so obvious?" Dr. Mullery glanced at the holographic scan again. "Because it's not something you would typically look for. It's not something most species would experience. But humans, our anatomy is different. Our biology responds differently to certain conditions." The Cthulhu healers seemed to be processing this information slowly. Their disbelief was turning into something else, perhaps acceptance, or at least an understanding that Dr. Mullery wasn't wrong. Ladies Rayla's breathing became more erratic, as if her body was responding to the tension in the room. Dr. Mullery turned back to the patient, focusing once again on the scan. His mind raced through the steps of how to dissolve the clock, how to avoid any risks, and how to manage the delicate situation. This wasn't an ordinary procedure, and he knew the Psi were watching closely, judging his every move. "We need to act now," Dr. Mullery said, his voice growing more urgent. "The clot is pressing on a major artery. If it bursts, it could be fatal. I need your approval to begin the procedure." The Cathy were quiet for a moment, and Dr. Mullery could feel their hesitation. They had never trusted a human with such an important task, and yet they could see the resolve in his eyes, the certainty in his words. He wasn't bluffing. The head diplomat, a tall Cthulhu male with golden eyes, stepped forward. "We trust you with this human, doctor, but if anything happens to Lady Sarah, we will hold you responsible." Dr. Mullery nodded, knowing that he had just been given the green light to proceed. The pressure was immense, but he couldn't afford to let it shake him. This was more than just a medical procedure. The fate of Lady SAA and the future of human-Cthulhu relations hung in the balance. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I will do everything I can to save her." He turned to the medical team. prepare the operating room we need to dissolve the clot safely, and quickly the room was filled with swift movements. As the Cthulhu prepared for procedure, Mullery was calm, now his mind focused entirely on the task at hand. He had treated blood clots before, he knew the risks and the techniques, but this was different. He was dealing with an alien anatomy, one that was more complex than anything he had encountered before. But he was a doctor, and a doctor's job was to heal no matter the species. He could feel the weight of the moment. This was more than just saving life. It was about proving to the Cthulhu that humanity was not just a young species to be dismissed, but one capable of surprising strength and knowledge. The future of their relations could be shaped in this very room. And so, Dr. Mullery took a deep breath and prepared to save Lady Isra, hoping that the calf would finally see the value in human ingenuity and medical skill. The medical bay was a whirlwind of activity. The tension in the air was most palpable as Dr. Mullery prepared to carry out the procedure that could save Lady Sela's life. The carry officials stood back watching in silence. They had given their approval, but their eyes still betrayed a sense of doubt. They didn't fully trust the human methods. After all, they had never seen anything like this before. How could a species so young in the galaxy's eyes possibly know what they were doing? But Dr. Mullery knew there was no room for hesitation. Lady S.A.'s life was on the line. He focused his attention on the medical equipment, adjusting the settings to make sure everything was ready. His hands moved quickly, but carefully, making sure that every tool was in place. He had practiced this type of procedure countless times on humans, but this was different. The care's biology was unique, and he had to account for every small difference. His mind raced as he double-checked the scan of Lady Sarah's body. The clot, located deep within her private area, was dangerously close to a major artery. The risk of rupture was high. He couldn't afford any mistakes. He needed to dissolve the clot before it caused irreversible damage. But he also had to make sure that Lady Sarah's delicate organs weren't harmed in the process. Dr. Mullery turned to the Kerr medical team, who had been watching from the side. They were experts in their own field, but they had no experience with this particular issue. The thought of a human saving their diplomat seemed almost impossible to them. Yet here they were, trusting him with her life. Prepare for the procedure. Dr. Mullery set his voice calm but firm. He could feel the pressure mounting, but he couldn't afford to let it affect him. He was a doctor. His job was to save lives, and right now that's what mattered most. The C-team moved quickly, assisting him with the advanced medical technology. They had never seen such machines before, but they worked alongside him, eager to see what he would do. One of the younger K-Theory healers, a female with green skin and sharp features, handed him the medical instruments he needed. We've adjusted the settings as you requested, Dr. Good. Dr. Mullery replied, nodding his approval. Now let's begin. He turned his attention back to Lady Sarah, who lay unconscious on the operating table. Her breathing was shallow, and her vital signs were weak. The clot was still there, silently threatening her. Lifetime was running out, and Dr. Mullery knew he had to act fast. He made the first incision, careful not to damage any of the surrounding tissues. The room was filled with a soft hum as the medical machines worked in unison, providing vital data on Lady Sarah's condition. The cast officials washed with bated breath. They had never seen anything like this before. Human medicine was so different from their own, but there was no turning back now. The procedure had begun. Dr. Mullery carefully navigated through the delicate tissues, making sure not to cause any harm. The cat hair had their own ways of healing, but this was a new frontier. A human medic working on an alien diplomat. No one could have predicted this. Yet here they were watching as Dr. Mullery slowly made his way toward the clot. The pressure in the room seemed to grow with every passing second. As he got closer to the clot, Dr. Mullery's hand steadied. He was used to high-stake situations, but this was different. The officials who had once doubted him were now watching intently. They were silent, waiting for the moment when Dr. Mullery would either succeed or fail. The weight of their expectations pressed on him, but he couldn't afford to let it overwhelm him. He had to stay focused. The clot was more stubborn than he expected. It wasn't just sitting there waiting to be dissolved. It was tightly packed, making it harder to break apart. Dr. Mullery adjusted the settings on the equipment to increase the dissolving agent's effectiveness, he had to be careful. If he was too aggressive, he risked damaging Lady Sarah's organs, but if he didn't act quickly enough, the Clot could cause even more damage. Steady, he muttered under his breath, just steady the K Ferry medical team. Continue to monitor the readings, their eyes flicking between the holographic displays, and Dr. Mallory's hands. They were still uncertain about the humans' methods, but they were beginning to see the results. Slowly, the Clot began to break down, its form disintegrating as the dissolving agent took effect. It wasn't a quick proc process, but it was work in the room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief as Dr. Mallory continued to work. He could see the Clot shrinking, its dangerous mass breaking apart, but he knew that this was just the beginning. There was still the risk of the Clot causing damage to Lady Sela's internal organs. He couldn't relax yet. He had to make sure that every last piece of the Clot was gone and that Lady Sela's body could heal without any complications. As the last traces of the Clot disappeared, Dr. Mallory carefully sealed up the incision. The procedure had been a success, but the hardest part wasn't over yet. Lady Sela's recovery depended on how her body responded in the coming hours. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but he allowed himself a small moment of relief. The Cthulhu officials exchanged quiet murmurs, their earlier doubts now replaced with a sense of awe. Dr. Mallory had done it. He had saved Lady Sarah's life, but Dr. Mallory wasn't celebrating yet. There was still work to be done, and as he wiped his brow and stood back, he couldn't help but feel a small surge of pride. This was more than just a medical victory. This was a turning point for humanity in the galaxy. He turned to the K Ferry diplomats, his voice steady but filled with quiet confidence. She's going to be fine. The Clot is gone, and she's stay. The room was silent for a moment before the head diplomat spoke. You have proven something today, human doctor. You have proven that humanity is not to be underestimated. Dr. Mallory nodded, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for humanity in the galactic community. He had earned their trust, and in doing so had paved the way for a new era of cooperation between species. Lady SAA's recovery was slow, but steady. The next few hours would be critical. As Dr. Mallory watched the monitors in the medical bay, he couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. The Clot was gone, and the procedure had gone smoothly, but he knew that healing was a delicate process. The Carry officials remained nearby, their presence both supportive and watchful. Dr. Mallory stepped back from the operating table, taking a deep breath. The surgery was over, but now he had to monitor Lady SAA closely. He glanced at the Kyrie diplomats who stood nearby, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. They had watched as a human medic worked his way through the procedure, each movement precise, each decision critical. They had put their trust in him, and now they were beginning to see the results. I stabilize her for now, Dr. Mallory said, turning to face the group, but we'll need to keep an eye on her for the next few hours. Her body needs time to recover from the trauma. One of the Kauai diplomats, a tall male with blue-hued skin, stepped forward. You have done more than we could have imagined. Human Lady Sela's life was in your hands, and you saved her. Dr. Mallory nodded, grateful for the acknowledgement, though he knew this was only the first step. She's not out of danger yet, he said, his voice calm but firm. We'll need to make sure the Clot doesn't reform, and we'll monitor her vital signs closely. This is just the beginning of her recovery. The diplomat smiled, though there was still some weariness in his expression. We understand, human. We trust your judgment. The shift in their attitude was hard to ignore. Just hours ago, the Psi had been skeptical of Dr. Mallory's abilities. They had hesitated to place their faith in a species they considered inexperienced compared to their ancient civilization, but now with Lady Sela's life spared, there was a clear shift. A trust between the Cthulhu and the humans had begun to form, and that trust would carry heavy consequences for the future. As the hours passed, Dr. Mallory remained by Lady Sarah's side, watching her closely. Her condition improved, though it was clear she was still weak. Her breathing had become steadier, and her pulse, though faint, was stable. The swelling in her body had reduced significantly, but there was still a long way to go before she was fully recovered. The Kithi diplomats continued to observe in silence, their expressions no longer filled with doubt. They had seen the results with their own eyes, and the relief in their faces was evident. They had trusted Dr. Mallory to save Lady Isa, and he had proven himself worthy of that trust. Meanwhile, the younger Kether, Healer, who had assisted Dr. Mallory during the procedure, approached him cautiously. Her skin shimmered faintly. Under the medical lights, a SEL sign of her nervousness. "Dr. Mahler, may I speak?" "With you for a moment," Dr. Mallory turned to her, offering a reassuring smile of, "Course, what's on your mind?" The healer hesitated before speaking. I just wanted to thank you. I didn't believe that a human could perform such a delicate procedure. I thought we could handle it on our own, but now I see things differently." Dr. Mallory nodded. "I appreciate that, but you and your people are incredibly skilled. I just brought a different perspective to the table. We each have something valuable to contribute." The healer smiled, looking a bit more at ease. "Perhaps there's more to humans than we originally thought." Dr. Mallory chuckled softly. "There's a lot more, but you'll see it for yourself in time." As the evening wore on, Lady Isra showed further signs of improvement. Her breathing was deeper, and the color had returned to her cheeks. She wasn't out of the woods yet, but the danger had passed for the moment. Dr. Mallory's heart lifted as he saw the healing process unfold before his eyes. He had done it. He had saved a diplomat and earned the trust of an entire species. The K-theory diplomats, though still cautious, could no longer deny the skill of the human medic. They had seen it firsthand as the hours passed. Their attitude toward Dr. Mallory shifted from skepticism to respect. They were beginning to understand that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The young species from Earth had just proven that they had something important to offer, something more than raw technology or power. Human ingenuity, determination, and a willingness to learn. The head diplomat, who had once been the most resistant to DR's involvement, approached him once again. His golden eyes were filled with a newfound respect. "You have done something extraordinary today, Dr. Mallory. We were wrong to doubt you." Dr. Mallory nodded. "Thank you, but I'm just doing my job. Your job has earned you something greater. Today you've earned our trust and the trust of Lady Sarah. This will change the way we look at humans in the galaxy." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Dr. Mallory understood the gravity of what the diplomat was saying. This wasn't just about saving one life. It was about changing the way an entire species viewed humanity. It was about breaking down barriers and building relationships that could last for generations. As the KY diplomats gathered around Lady Sarah's bedside, Dr. Mallory felt a sense of pride swell within him. This was a victory, not only for Lady STA, but for humanity as a whole. He had proven that humans, despite their youth in the galaxy, had the skill, intelligence, and determination to stand among the stars. And with that, a new chapter in the relationship between humans and the Cthulhu had begun, one built on trust, respect, and the knowledge that sometimes the smallest spark of hope can light up the darkest of times. The following days in the medical bay were a time of quiet reflection. Lady SA's condition continued to improve, much to the relief of the K-theory diplomats and Dr. Mallory alike. Her breathing had deepened, her color had returned, and she was now awake, though still weak. The healers attended to her, following Dr. Mallory's instructions, and slowly but surely Lady Sarah was regaining her strength. As she rested, Dr. Mallory couldn't help but reflect on the changes that had taken place in such a short amount of time. Just a few days ago, he had been a stranger in a foreign land, unsure of how his skills would be received by the cavalry, but now he had earned their respect, and not just the respect of the healers, but of their highest-ranking officials as well. The Cathy had always been a proud and ancient species, their civilization stretching back for eons. They had never needed help from other species, especially not from a young developing race like humanity. But now, after the successful procedure, they were beginning to see humans in a new light. Dr. Mallory's actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. He had proven that humans were capable of more than they had imagined. One evening, after a long day of monitoring Lady Sela's recovery, the head diplomat approached Dr. Mallory. His golden eyes glimmered with something new, something more than just curiosity. There was genuine respect. There now a recognition that humans were not so different from the Cthulhu. "After all, you have done something remarkable, Dr. Mallory." The diplomat set his voice, warm but still carrying the weight of authority, not just for Lady S.A., but for all of us. Dr. Mallory looked up from the medical equipment he was adjusting. "I'm just glad she's doing better. That's what matters most." The diplomat nodded. "But you have done more than that. You've shown us that we can work together, that our species are not so separate as We once thought you've opened a door, Dr. Mallory 1, that we never thought possible. Dr. Mallory had always believed in the power of cooperation between different peoples. It was one of the reasons he had become a doctor to help, to heal and to build bridges between worlds. But hearing the head diplomat's words made him realize that the work he had done wasn't just about one patient or one procedure. It was about something much bigger. It was about forging a connection between humanity and a species that had once viewed them as insignificant. I believe we can accomplish a lot together, Dr. Mallory replied, his voice steady. There's much we can learn from each other. Humans may not have the long history that the sea have, but we have our strengths, and those strengths combined with your wisdom could lead to great things. The diplomat's expression softened. Perhaps you're right. The universe is vast, and there is so much we have yet to understand. Maybe this is the beginning of something new. As they spoke, the rest of the K-Theory delegation had gathered around Lady Sarah's bedside. She was awake, now her eyes clear, though still filled with exhaustion. The room was quiet as the diplomats stood in a semicircle, their faces filled with admiration and gratitude. Lady Sarah turned her head slowly, her G meeting Dr. Mallory's. You saved me, she whispered, her voice weak but sincere. Dr. Mallory smiled gently. It was my honor, Lady S.A. I'm just glad you're feeling better. The Carey diplomat stepped forward, his golden eyes softening as he addressed Dr. Mallory. Once more, we owe you much. Human, your actions have not only saved a life, but have also changed the way we view your people. Dr. Mallory nodded, though he didn't feel like a hero. He had just done his job, but he understood the importance of what had just happened. This wasn't just about Lady S.A.'s life being saved. It was about the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between humanity and the Cthulhu. There was potential here, potential for cooperation, for shared knowledge, and for peace. As the days Dr. Mallory continued to help Lady S.T.A. on her path to recovery, he kept an eye on her vitals, adjusted her treatments, and provided the care she needed. But more than that, he became a bridge between the two species. He was no longer just a human doctor in an alien world. He had become a symbol of what could be accomplished when different races worked together. The K-Theory healers, who had once been skeptical, now looked to Dr. Mallory for guidance. They had witnessed his skill and knowledge firsthand, and they were eager to learn from him. In turn, Dr. Mallory had been exposed to their advanced medical technology, which was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The exchange of knowledge was valuable to both sides, and it was clear that the collaboration between the two species was only just beginning. One morning, as Lady Sarah sat up in bed for the first time since the procedure, the head diplomat spoke again. There is much we must discuss, he said, his voice firm yet hopeful. We will need to meet with your leaders. We believe that the cooperation between our species could open up new possibilities for both of us. There is much to be gained from mutual understanding and shared wisdom. Dr. Mallory nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride in what had been accomplished. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time it felt like humanity had a place among the stars, a place where they could make a real difference. As the Cthulhu began to prepare for their diplomatic meetings, Dr. Mallory felt a quiet satisfaction. He had helped save a life, yes, but more importantly, he had helped build a foundation for a future where humans and Cthulhu would work together. And as he looked around the room at the peaceful faces of the Cthulhu diplomats and Lady ISA, he knew that this was only the beginning of something much greater. The days after Lady Sarah's recovery passed quickly with a new sense of urgency taking hold. The CAF were preparing to meet with the human delegation, and it seemed that everything had changed. The once cautious diplomats had become eager to discuss the possibilities that lay ahead for the first time in a long while. There was hope for cooperation, for shared knowledge, and for a future where both humans and Cthulhu could thrive together. Dr. Mallory was exhausted, but content. He had spent the past several days monitoring Lady Sarah's recovery, checking her vitals and ensuring that she was in good health. The diplomats had continued to express their gratitude, but there was something more now, a deeper respect, a recognition that humans had something to offer, something beyond what they had originally thought. One morning, as he walked into the medical bay, he was greeted by the sight of Lady S.A. sitting up, her once pale skin now showing the healthy glow of recovery. She smiled at him as he approached, her golden eyes filled with gratitude. Dr. Mallory, she said softly, her voice still a little weak, but warm I owe you my life, Dr. Mallory smiled, though he was careful not to let his pride show you're strong. Lady Isa, your body did most of the work. I just gave it a little help. She shook her head, her expression sincere. Without you, I would not be here today. I can never thank you enough. You don't have to thank me, he replied gently. It's my job, after all. Lady Isa looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand something more about him. Then she spoke again. Your people are unlike any I've met before. You showed us that there is more to humanity than we ever imagined. Mallory paused. The words she had spoken were powerful. It was one thing to hear praise from a single diplomat, but hearing it from Lady Sarah, herself a representative of her entire species, meant something entirely different. This wasn't just about saving one life anymore. This was about something far bigger. I believe that we have a lot to learn from each other, he said, his voice steady, and that includes understanding each other's strengths. Lady Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I believe that too. Perhaps this is the beginning of something new for both our peoples. As the days passed, Dr. Mallory continued to meet with the K, the officials, exchanging knowledge about their medical practices and learning more about their advanced technology. The more he worked with them, the more he began to realize that their civilization was not just ancient and wise, it was also willing to adapt and grow. The Carry were no longer the mysterious, distant species they had once been in the eyes of humanity. They were allies, partners, and friends. But even as the diplomats expressed their hopes for future collaboration, Dr. Mailer couldn't shake the feeling that there was still much to be done. He had earned their trust, yes, but trust was only the beginning. There were still challenges to face, both in terms of diplomacy and cooperation, and the path forward was uncertain. He had seen how easily things could go wrong, how one misstep could ruin everything. The future of humanity's relationship with the K theory would depend on how well both sides had learned to work together. One evening, as the sun set over the alien planet, Dr. Mallory found himself standing on the balcony of his quarters, looking out at the vast landscape before him. The sky was a strange shade of violet, and the distant mountains seemed to stretch on forever. He had always been fascinated by the unknown, by the mysteries of the universe. But now it felt different. Now the unknown held the promise of new possibilities, of new friendships, and of hope. He was interrupted by a soft voice behind him. He turned to see Lady Sarah standing in the doorway, her eyes still glowing with the soft golden hue of her people. I thought I might find you here, she said with a small smile. You've done more than you know, Dr. Mallory. Your efforts have given us something to believe in. Dr. Mallory turned to face her fully, his hands resting on the balcony rail. I'm just one person. This is bigger than me. She stepped closer, her expression serious but kind. You may be one person, but your actions have made a difference. It's not just about saving one life. It's about showing us that we can work together, that we don't have to be divided by our differences. He nodded, a sense of peace settling in his chest. I hope that's true. I hope that we can build something real, something lasting. Lady Isa smiled softly, her golden eyes reflecting the fading light of the setting sun. I believe we can. I truly do. Dr. Mallory's heart swelled with pride. He had come to this planet unsure of what to expect, uncertain of what he could offer, but now he was beginning to see that the potential for cooperation between humanity and the K that was boundless. There would be challenges, of course, but he believed in the strength of both species to overcome them. As they stood there together, looking out at the horizon, Dr. Mallory felt a deep sense of hope. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time it felt like humanity had a place in the galaxy, a place where they could contribute, learn, and grow alongside the Curry. And with that thought, Dr. Mallory knew that whatever came next, he was ready. He was ready to face the unknown with hope, determination, and the belief that together anything was possible. The days that followed Lady Sarah's full recovery marked a turning point for both humanity and the Cthulhu. The delicate dance of diplomacy continued, but the foundation had already been laid. Humans were no longer strangers to the Cthulhu, and the Cthulhu were no longer distant figures in the galaxy. What had started with a life saved had blossomed into something much more meaningful, a partnership based on mutual respect and the willingness to learn from one another. Dr. Mallory had returned his duties, though his work had taken on new significance. He was no longer just a medic, but a representative of humanity, a symbol of the potential that lay in interspecies cooperation the Cath had opened there. Medical archives to him, sharing knowledge that was light years ahead of anything Earth had ever achieved, and in return Dr. Mallory had shared humanity's discoveries, its own advancements in medicine and technology, offering the Cthulhu a glimpse of what could be accomplished when different worlds came together. But for Dr. Mallory, it was not the medical technology that fascinated him the most, it was the way the sea viewed life. Their culture was ancient, rich in history, and filled with wisdom that stretched back centuries. They had learned the value of patience, of balance, and of working together for the greater good. It was a way of life that was both humbling and inspiring, and it made Dr. Mallory even more determined to see this new alliance succeed. One afternoon, as he walked through the quay of the city, Lady Sarah approached him. The once weak diplomat had become a symbol of the new relationship between their species. She was stronger now, her once tired features now glowing with health, her golden eyes sparkled with purpose as she met Dr. Mallory's gaze. "You've done more for us than you know," she said with a warm smile. Dr. Mallory nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I've only done what anyone would do, but I'm glad it's making a difference." She smiled softly, her expression thoughtful. "It's not just about saving lives, Dr. Mallory. It's about saving our future. You've helped us see that there is more to our place in the universe than we ever realized, and for that we are grateful." The two stood together for a long moment, looking out over the city that had become the symbol of this new era of cooperation. The buildings were unlike anything on Earth, towering structures made of materials that shimmered in the light. The landscape was lush, filled with strange yet beautiful plants that seemed to glow under the alien sky. It was a city of hope, a city built on the promise of a shared future. Dr. Mallory could feel the weight of what they had accomplished together. What had started as a medical emergency had evolved into something far more significant, a partnership that would shape the future of both species. The Cathy had learned to trust humanity, and humanity had learned to trust the Cthulhu. It was a relationship built on understanding, on the recognition that both species had something valuable to offer. "It's not over, you know, ladies." Continued breaking Dr. Mallory's thoughts. "This is just the beginning. There are many more challenges ahead, but I believe we are ready for them.